All right. Okay. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining me. We are going to read the last two chapters today. We're going to finish the story of the Hittite warrior and the odyssey that Uriah Tarhund has traveled and he's gone through. Um, Chapter 27 is called the Ark of the Covenant. And then I think then chapter 28, home. Now remember, what's home to Uriah? Is it Great Hatti? Is it the hills of the desert? Is it Tyre? Is it a part of Canaan? What is home? We'll find out. All right, so let's read chapter 27, the Ark of the Covenant. We know that Uriah in the last chapter brought Mehitabel, and he braved the Hebrew encampment. Remember, he is an enemy of Israel. And he walked in and brought Mehitabel, and Jotham and Mehitabel reunited. And then he walked out of the tent. Chapter 27, the Ark of the Covenant. I walked through the makeshift tents of the Sidonian refugees. Some of them did not even have tents, but huddled about fires in the open. The man who had sold me the donkey called to me as I passed. "Where are you going, Uriah Tarhund?" "To the chief of the tribesmen," I answered him. "Don't go," cried the man. But I walked on. The great tent of Sisera was before my eyes, and I knew who must be within it. I remembered his voice above the battle, when I had lain across the body of Labernash. And now, even then, it had cleared my mind and cooled my fever so that I could rise to my feet again. There is no one left for me to go to but him, I thought. I will not hide from him. You know who he's talking about. He's talking about Barak. Two soldiers stopped me when I came to the Hebrew camp. "I must see the chief," I said to them. "Why should we take you to him?" said one of them. "How do we know you are not an enemy?" "I am an enemy," I replied. "I fought against you in the battle on the plain." They stared at me as at a madman. "Here," I said, "you see I have no weapon." "Do you want to die?" asked the other soldier. "I only want to see Barak," I replied. They looked at each other, and finally the first one shrugged. "Let him have his wish," he said grimly. They took me through the camp, through braying pack animals and barking dogs, through men telling stories and playing games around fires. Some of them were singing, and I heard snatches of the song. The kings came and fought, then fought the kings of Canaan and Tanakh by the waters of the Megiddo. The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. The river of Kishon swept them away. That ancient river, the river Kishon. Awake, awake, Deborah. Awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, thou son of Abinoam. We came to the tent of Sisera. A sentry listened to the whispered words of the two soldiers, stared at me a moment, then went inside. In a moment, he was back and pointed me silently inside. I felt as in a dream, as if I were back in time, going in with Memnon to worship again with Sisera before the image of the thunder god. I forced my feet to move, and they carried me, blinking, into the light of torches. There was no more image of Teshub, and no more image of blue-headed Dagon. The rich ornaments and furnishings were gone, parceled out probably among the heroes of the battle. There was only a rug and a brazier of coals, and Barak on his camp stool. He was alone. I looked at him, the simple herdsman, the great warrior. He looked tired beyond belief and stared at me with puzzled eyes. His beard was ragged and his arms were bare, but he wore a shimmering breastplate that I remembered well, and in that moment I knew for sure that Sisera was dead. "Why did you come here?" he asked me. "To keep a promise," I answered. "Besides, I had nowhere else to go. The Philistines are on the coast." "You might have stayed with them," he said, his eyes searching my face. I shook my head. "I could not." He bowed his head and closed his eyes, and I knew he wanted to sleep more than anything else. But I had given myself into his hands and felt that I could ask him a favor. "Before you pass judgment on me," I said, "tell me how Sisera died." For I wanted to hear it from his mouth and no other. He, I knew, would not mock. Barak sighed and spoke heavily. "He fled north from the plain, and we pursued him. He came to the tents of Heber the Kenite, who had told him our secrets. The woman Jael was there, whom his soldiers stole from her family when she was a child." I remember the still face of Jael and her strange eyes. My skin crept. "She called him into her tent and made him welcome. And when she saw him weak from hunger and thirst, she gave him goat's milk instead of water, and cheese in her finest bowl. Then while he slept, she came to him and killed him with a tent pin and a hammer. She struck off his head and gave it into my hands. Listen, they sing of it now." Outside the tent I heard the high voice of a singer. "Blessed among women shall Jael be, the wife of Heber the Kenite. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. She brought forth butter in a lordly dish. At her feet he bowed, he fell, he lay down. At her feet he bowed, he fell. Where he bowed, there he fell down dead. Menment had not been there to guard him, and a woman had had the glory of his death. Menment had been right to say that he feared all the people, and he had been right to fear them, for they had suffered greatly at his hands. Yet he had loved my father and been good to me, and I mourned his death. I rubbed the tears from my cheeks and raised my eyes to Barak, waiting for his judgment. It was Heber the Kenite who betrayed us, he said, looking hard at me. He has been given to our God, meaning they killed him. I flushed with shame. Yet it was true. I had told Sisera nothing he had not known from Heber. I am sick of death, said Barak. What gods do you worship? I don't know, I confessed. Can you find it in your heart to worship the one God of Israel? I don't know, I said again. Find out, said Barak. If you can, stay. Otherwise, go down to Egypt and bow before idols with the heads of beasts. Or go back to Tyre and cringe to the Philistines and let your children be devoured by Moloch. But do not play us false again, or you will surely die. I stood again beneath the stars, wandering without purpose through the camp of the tribesmen. Outside on a high place was the tabernacle that the child had said housed the God of Israel. I will see him, I told myself. Perhaps he will give me a sign. And I hurried through the darkness, stumbling sometimes in my eagerness to climb the hill. A young man lay outside the tent to guard it. He looked like a priest of Egypt, for he was dressed in linen, and his head and face were shaven. It was strange to see such a man among these people, but I remember the stories of Deborah and the many years of their strange history. I have come to see your God, I told him. But no one but the priests can enter here, said the young man. But I will hold back the entrance, and you can look in. In strange expectation, I looked inside. The tent was lit by a golden candlestick with 7 branches. The light fell upon an object that looked like a great box, carved from a solid block of wood, covered with gold, and with gold rings through which staves were passed. On either side, looking toward the center, were two cherubim with the wings and heads of eagles. "Is your God in there?" I asked the priest. He shook his head. "The Ark of the Covenant holds relics sacred to our God. Some say they are the tablets with the laws that he gave to our great leader Moses. No one knows. And there is no image of him. How could any man," said the young priest, "make such an image?" I turned away, a great disappointment in my heart. I could not see him after all. He would give me no sign. He too had failed me. I hope you noticed that also when he saw with the candlestick and the 7 branches, if you've ever seen the candlestick for the Jewish religion, you'll see those, for Hanukkah. Okay, well, menorah, I think that's what it's called. But as I walked back to the camp, I looked at the moon and the stars. They are gods. They had told me, but I no longer believed it. And if they and the sun and the earth and the sea and the rivers were not gods, what God had made them? And who indeed could picture such a one as that? "How manifold are thy works," Moses had sung. "O so God, like whom there is no other." And I decided that I did not have to see him, and that he did not have to send me a sign. And I knew what it was that had led me again to Harosheth. Chapter 28, Home. Harosheth had fallen, and Tanakh, and not long after runners brought word that the great city of Megiddo had been starved into surrender. The great towns of inland Canaan were in the hands of the tribes. The Ark of the Covenant was carried by the priests in triumph to the sacred town of Shiloh in the south, and many pilgrims followed it, singing the new song of Deborah. "Awake, awake, Deborah. Awake, awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, and lead thy captivity captive, thou son of Abinoam." I had hoped to see Deborah herself again, but she had returned to her home after the battle on the plain. She had been with them and had offered her life with theirs. But now, she said, they had no more need of her, and she, being old and tired, had much need of rest. It was Jotham who told me this. He had come and asked me for Mehetabel, meaning, can I marry Mehetabel? There was no one else to ask, and I had made myself as her brother. "I have no bride price," he warned me. "Yes, you have," I said, suddenly remembering one of the things I had meant to tell him. "Your uncle has fled from Gaza and the south of Canaan. You have only to go to your home and claim your property." I told him the story of the sea voyage and the ransom. We both laughed aloud, though it had surely not been funny at the time. And Jotham promised to pay me the bride price in silver or in cattle, whichever I chose. On a day not long after, he came to our tent to lead the veiled Mehetabel to the wedding feast. He shone and jingled with wedding ornaments, captured on the field of battle, and was accompanied by friends. One of the friends was Samuel, the son of Hushai. I had not seen any of the family of Hushai since I had come to the encampment of the Hebrews. I had not looked forward to facing them, for I could not forget how I had betrayed their hospitality. And Samuel, who had hated me anyway, was the last one I had wanted to see. He paused a moment at the sight of me, and I stood back away from the joking and the laughter, not knowing what to say or what to do. Then he came toward me. If he wants a fight, I thought to myself, I can do nothing but face him, but my heart will not be in it. We looked at each other for a moment, then suddenly he laid his hand on my shoulder. Why do you hang back? He said. The feast is in the tent of my father, and you are the giver of the bride." And then I saw that if Jotham and I had been changed by the battle on the plain, so had he. Probably in that one day he had seen enough men slain before his God to last his lifetime. He looked older and sadder, and there was no more hatred in his eyes. So with no more misgivings, I joined the wedding party and danced and clapped my hands with the rest on the way to the feast, listening to the wedding songs. And at the wedding feast, I saw Tamar again. She did not speak to me or meet my eyes, but she passed the wine cup, and when she gave it to me, I set it down and took hold of her hands. They were locked together as Jotham's and Mehetabel's had been in the tent of the old woman. And I knew at last that I had come home. That was many years ago. The tents of the Hebrew camp have long been scattered, and only birds and animals wander in the ruins of the great city of Harosheth. However, Megiddo was not destroyed and has become a strong fortress city for Israel, as it was for Canaan. Canaan has new lords now. Israel is strong in the hills, and the hand of the Philistines is heavy on the coast. And like Canaan, all the world around us is changing masters. The sea people did not conquer Egypt, but they broke her power and took her lands, and the world will never again tremble at her name. We look to the north and to the west now, north to those rough heirs of the old Babylonian power, the Assyrians, who cast greedy eyes on the world that was lost by the Hittites, and to the mountains of the northeast, whence stories come of fierce Median and Persian tribes that hover on the edge of the known world and wait their chance to come down. West to the little known lands across the sea that sent us the sea people, and that now mutter and rumble among themselves like waking giants. Talking about the Romans. The shadow of the future is theirs, not Egypt. But for the present, we wait only for the day when the Philistines will come upon us, mightier than the Canaanites ever were, and we know that day will come soon. And over the tribes from the east hangs always the shadow of the desert people, Amalek, Moab, Midian. And so that Israel is beset by many enemies, but the hills are on her side, and so is her God. And the memory of Deborah and Barak gives her strength. For my story, I married Tamar. I have a son and 3 daughters. I am old, and Jotham and Mehetabel are old, and Jabin, who has become a strong man among the tribes, has hair and a beard that have already turned gray. We live as neighbors not far from the sacred town of Shiloh, within sight of the tabernacle that houses the Ark of the Covenant. I became a scribe. Who would have believed it in the days when I rode the steps of Arzawa and jeered at all men who could read and write? But such men were much needed in Shiloh, and looking into my heart, I knew it was the life I had been born for, though I would never have known it if the sea people had not taken Great Hatti. I have devoted my life to my new God, whom I have come to believe is the one God, and the God of all men. I have traveled much, collecting and writing down the ancient songs and stories that are sung of him. The prophecies too, and one that is most dear to me, the prophecy of a Lord of Lords who will one day be born to bring his message to all the nations of the world. Perhaps in dark days that will surely come upon us, such writings will be destroyed, but may they never be forgotten. In this manner I live, and I have prospered too. Outside the city I have flocks and herds, even horses, bred from one of those that were taken after the battle on the plain. One of them belongs to my grandson. a long-eared golden horse that he raised and trained from the day of its birth, and was the first to harness. He calls him Labernash. That's it. All right. I think that's a great ending. I hope you thought so too. We get to hear what happened to Uriah in his amazing life's journey, his story. And I hope you did enjoy it. I hope you have some questions or some comments, and we will talk about those later. All right, you guys, enjoy your day. Enjoy the ending of our book, and we will start a new one in about a week. All right, take care. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.